In this video, we are going to talk all about base paint. So for base paint, these are really the only options that I have to show you. I am very specific on my base paint, and I will tell you exactly why. When it comes to base, there are a few things to consider. Is your surface nice and smooth, or is it more rough and needs more of a primed surface? So for example, I used to paint a lot of natural rocks. So on natural rocks, they have more pits or more of an uneven or rough surface. So when I paint those, not all the time, but sometimes I like to use a gesso or gesso, however you like to pronounce it. So a gesso is basically going to prime the surface. It says adds tooth, so it gives it a little bit more grip for the paint to adhere to. But it's really good for more rough surfaces. I use this on rocks. If I were to paint on canvas, I would use a gesso first to prime the surface so that the paint isn't seeping into the canvas because it is more textured. So it really just depends on the surface that you're working on. A gesso is a really good primer. So this comes, you'll sometimes see it in white or other colors. So if you use a white one, then you would use that to prime and then paint your base color over it. So since I typically like to paint on black, I just bought a black gesso. So again, just a personal preference, however you would like to do it. So I use this if I need to smooth out my surface or if it's a little bit more of a rough texture. But I paint on wood a lot and it's really smooth. The rocks, the plaster rocks, these ones, they're really smooth. So they don't really need a primer or a gesso in my opinion. So when I'm painting on a nice smooth surface, this is my go-to. This is my holy grail base paint. I've used it for years. All of my paintings that have a black background, this is what I use. So this is Folk Art Multi-Surface Satin in pure black. And the reason that I prefer this paint and specifically a multi-surface paint is because multi-surface paint are made to adhere to more surfaces. This is also an indoor-outdoor paint. So if you can't find a multi-surface paint, my second go-to would be an outdoor paint. For the base, you just want something that's really going to grip to the surface to make sure that it doesn't start to peel off over time. So multi-surface is really great for that because it's made to adhere to all different types of surfaces. This says premium durable satin acrylic paint for glass, ceramics, wood, metal, rigid plastics, canvas, fabric, and terracotta. So it's made to adhere to all different types of surfaces, which means that it's less likely to start to chip or peel off. So I had someone recently reach out to me. They were painting on a plaster surface like this. They were not using a multi-surface paint. They were just using a regular black paint. And when they went to draw the guide marks, the pencil was kind of like ripping the paint off. So I recommended to them to use a multi-surface paint, and they did, and they said that made a huge difference. The paint was adhering a lot better with a multi-surface paint. So for base, I highly recommend using a multi-surface or an outdoor paint. So this is Folk Art, and as you guys know, most of my paint is deco art. So you might be wondering, why do I use Folk Art when deco art makes a very similar product? So if you look at these, very similar, deco art Americana multi-surface satin in black. So this is pretty much the equivalent to this one, but deco art instead of Folk Art. So why do I do that? So I've tried both of these, and again, as a beginner, I highly recommend testing out different paints, different finishes, and seeing what works best for you. I tried this Deco Art Americana multi-surface, and the issue that I had with it was even after it was fully dry, the texture or the finish of it caused my chalk pencil to not go on. So when this was my base, my chalk pencil was not showing up. So that was an issue for me because I need my guide marks to show up, and with this one, they did not. So that is why I do not use the Deco Art Americana. And something I just want to point out with this one, so there are pros and cons to every product out there. So with this one, it's not just like an easy put on the surface and you're good to go. With this one, I noticed that if the paint goes on too thick, then I have that same issue of my guide marks not showing up. So with this one, you have to use a really thin one layer in order for the pencil to go on smoothly. So I used to use just a regular paintbrush to paint this paint on, but once I realized that it needed to be a thinner layer, one of my friends recommended using a sponge brush. I am actually fresh out of them, so I don't have one to show you, but I will put a picture up on the screen. You can find these really cheap at, I got mine at, Hobby Lobby, but Michael's, Hobby Lobby, craft stores typically have some type of foam spongy brush, and I just get it a little bit damp before and then squeeze out any water, just want it a little bit damp, and then I use it to brush this on, and it makes a really thin, smooth layer, no brush strokes, and works perfect combined with this Folk Art multi-surface. Some people prefer painting on a matte finish, which I personally do not, because I found that when I paint on a matte finish and I draw my guide marks and then I dot on top, the dots kind of get stuck in the charcoal pencil and it makes them uneven. And I've only experienced that when using a matte finish. I also prefer a satin because satin is just like the name, it's satin, it's very smooth. So that makes my dots and my swooshes and my brush strokes, everything go on a lot smoother on a satin finish. So there's a lot of things to consider when choosing your base paint, and I've tried all different types over the years and finally just realized that this one is my favorite, so this is now my go-to. So yes, I hope that you find that helpful. If you are interested in learning more from me, I teach weekly live classes over on Patreon. Once you become a Patreon subscriber, you will have instant access to a library of all of my past classes. I also share other things on Patreon, such as my color palette recipes and exclusive discount codes to your favorite dotting suppliers. There is also a 24-hour group chat where you can interact with myself and the community and share photos of your work and ask questions. And you will also have access to Patreon Messenger, where you can message me at any time. All right, I hope to see you guys over on Patreon. Details are located in the description of this video.